It's crazy to me because I've never left a hate comment in my life. I can't imagine like going onto someone's page and being like, that looks ugly. You look ugly. I've never even considered doing that. And so, having that done to me was really hard, and it doesn't happen in person. No one's ever walked up to me and said, that cake is ugly that you made, but it happens online. And that was really hard for me to experience. They called me the evening before at around 7:00. And then they said it needed to be at the airport an hour away from where I live at 10 the next morning. And I hadn't baked a single thing. It was 3 tiers. I finished on the dot that I had to leave. I put the finishing touches on, and then we ran out the door. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. In the car, it was really bumpy, whatever route we had to go on that day, and the cake tipped over in the box. I cried on the way there. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did this. And then this happened.
Now let's talk about that cake you're about to go make, maybe even while listening to this podcast. I want to know what you're going to present it. A basic box with extenders wrapped in cellophane? I really hope not. There really is a simpler way to go about this by using OLBAA tall cake boxes. They're super strong, luxurious. They assemble in a minute with no extenders, no cellophane, and no fuss. Best of all, you get peace of mind when you hand it to your customer for its journey home, knowing it will arrive safely. You've just spent hours making that cake, so why not present it in something that shows it off? Check us out at www.olbaa.shop. Imagine you started baking at 11, and by age 12, your mum was already selling your goods on Facebook. That was 10 years ago for our guest today. Yes, that makes her 21, which makes today's episode really fascinating. I certainly was nowhere near a career at age 21, let alone in my teens. But Aubree certainly tapped her creativity, passed down to her, and leveraged that from a very early age. Based in Southern California, her career has already led to some really interesting bakes. You have to keep listening, though, to hear about some of them. She's incredibly talented, incredibly determined, and driven to make a success of everything she does at such a young age. This is just so inspiring to listen to. And to top that, a huge social media following has been built up as well as part of this process. Aubree is extremely focused and pushes herself to improve on what she's doing all the time. It's still mostly just her doing the work. So how does a 21-year-old do it, if you may ask? Keep listening to find out. Enjoy this one. Aubree, this is awesome. We are so excited to have you on the show. You are by far the youngest guest we've ever had, and we are really, really inspired by this. And I was having to think about the journey that you've been on, and we're going to talk about this, but I just wanted to ask you one simple question just to start things off. Do you ever just stop and look back at your last several years and just think, what's going on? Like, what has been happening?
Oh my gosh. All the time, literally every day, especially now. So this summer is 10 years since I started my business, actually. I started when I was 11 years old. So I've been super emotional recently, just looking back. And how I started really was my mom started posting my work on Facebook. And so some of her memories from 9 and 10 years ago have been popping up. And every time I look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. This is so insane. The journey's been so crazy.
Your creativity comes from somewhere. Is this the family? Is this siblings? Is this just how you were from as long as you remember? I mean, if you go back to before when you were 11, as much as you can remember, what were you like?
I've always been like this. I've always been creative. I come from a long line of creative family members, specifically on my mom's side. My mom was a fashion designer when she was younger. My grandma, she was a hairstylist and also a business owner. She owned a beauty shop with her and her sister. And then I'm sure plenty others before that. When I was little, I was always creating, always drawing. I was always sketching, designing, different things like that. So as long as I can remember, I've known that I wanted to do something creative, something in the creative space.
It's amazing, really. It's just an interesting thing to see. You never underestimate the people around you and how they have an effect on you as you develop into what your likes and interests and how you go. So then, all right, let's go back then. So you're a Food Network fan, nuts, right? As we like to say in the UK. it's amazing how that can just inspire you. Like, I'm sure you're probably looking there going, I want to be on that show. I want to be on this show or have my own.
Mm-hmm.
Your inspiration to make cupcakes at the start and then eventually sell those at a very young age. Did that just feel like you were filling time to do that? Were you bored in the summer? I mean, or was it something where you just took to baking and you just liked it as a thing to do? Because 11-year-olds are into all kinds of things, right? I mean, these days it's very different. But even if you go back 10 years, you've still got loads of things you could be into, sports and whatnot. And I don't know if you were in your school, they were teaching like home economics or baking or things like that. But you obviously picked that up from somewhere. Do you remember what kicked this all off?
Yeah, so it was kind of exactly that, what you mentioned, like I was bored in the summer. And that's all I remember. I have a very clear memory of like the day I started baking. Before that, like you mentioned, I loved Food Network. I was obsessed with Food Network. I watched it every single day. And I wanted to be a chef, actually. And so I wanted to go on like Chopped and MasterChef and stuff like that. And then I kind of discovered baking and cake decorating. And I realized I could combine my love for art with my love for food. Yeah, now I'm like creating edible art, which is like was my dream as a kid. So that's kind of how it kicked off for me.
Was it encouraged by your parents? I don't know what the school system's like in America, but I certainly know growing up for me, and obviously half an hour a little bit older than you, but a creative industry wasn't really encouraged as a job. It was more get your maths and your science and your English,
something serious.
You know, that you're not going to get a career out of being like an artist or something like that. So what I'm trying to understand, was it your parents like getting behind you saying this, or was it the schooling system, your art teacher or someone who was like, yeah, just go for it. Like, you can get a job through making cakes or going through that passion or being a chef.
Yeah, so it was 100% my family. In school, we didn't have many like home ec classes, but it was definitely my parents. I think my mom, being in a creative field, she saw the potential that had and definitely knew that you could create a whole career out of your creativity. Are the type of parents that have always supported everything that I've done. And I'm so grateful for that. Anything that I wanted to try, and I've tried many things, anything that I wanted to try, they were behind me and supported me 1,000%. And so when I first said that I wanted to start baking and they saw that, I had some potential and wanted to take it seriously, they would buy me supplies and post about it on Facebook. And my grandma, she bought me my first KitchenAid mixer when I was, I think, 12. And so their support has been everything and definitely what's gotten me to this point. And that's definitely something I hope to instill in my children in the future as well. Whatever they want to do, I want to hopefully support them 1,000%.
I've got to ask, what color was the KitchenAid, the first one?
It was white.
It was a white one.
She's only just replaced it, right? It was going for a good 10 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was going for about 7 years. I bought a pink one. I'm looking at it right there, but it was kind of a gift to myself when I kind of picked up my business again and things started kind of picking up. And yeah, I bought myself my first mixer. It was pink.
So you've been doing this baking then. We talked to a lot of people who've been doing baking for a decade, but obviously they're very later stages in their life. But for you, you've had to go through school at the same time that you've been slowly building this career and from a very early age, actually generating an income. So how did you manage that? Was it an on again, off again until a school break or a holiday that you could focus on baking? Or did you try to keep it up throughout?
Yeah, so it was on and off for some years, not because school was in the way, but mostly because of me. I didn't know that it was something that I could take on full time. I went to a high school that kind of had a special program, so I wasn't there every single day. I was only there about 3 days a week from about 9 to maybe noon. So after time, I would bake for customers and especially on the weekends and stuff like that. And the school was catered to kids like me who had like special interests in different things or sports outside of the school system. And juggling school and my job has been very difficult. I'm actually not in school right now. I was supposed to go to university, but I decided to take on my business full time. I was a 2020 graduate. And so the pandemic and everything kind of got in the way. And I say it got in the way, but it also provided me the opportunity to pick up my business full time and realize that it was something I could do full time and make a career out of it.
Was that quite a hard decision to make on deciding not to go through with university for you?
It was really hard. It was really difficult for me. Not going to university was something I had ever even considered, because from the time you're little, it's the only thing that people talk about. It's the only way to be successful, especially with my parents. And I say they supported me, but of course they wanted me to go to college. Most people have a very linear view of what success can look like. And I know it can look like so many different things. And so deciding to drop out of school basically was a really hard decision, but I knew in my gut that it was the right thing for me. And yeah, I'll never forget the day that I made that decision, because I felt like a relief, because I knew something was wrong. I knew I wasn't supposed to be in school. I knew I was supposed to be doing what I'm doing right now.
It's like the universe talking to you in a certain way kind of thing, right? Because you know something's not right, and until you make the decision, you just don't know if that was the right one, but then you feel it, right?
And I think university through lockdown wouldn't have been much fun anyway. You would have been doing a lot of remote courses and not really getting involved in many of the interactions and all that great stuff that comes from university. Mm-hmm. But there's plenty of time in the future if that door wants to be reopened again. What you're doing now is you're carving your own path and following your gut and following your heart and where you want to go. And it doesn't mean that you don't go to university. If you do, it might be in the future. And if you don't, it's okay. You're in the university of life, right? You're going in a different path. And I think it's brave to take a step away from the norm, because it's very conditioned, isn't it? It's conditioned from when you're younger. In America, you have different terms as well, elementary and
and then high school
and college, and to go away from the great and go away from what all your peers are doing as well. There's a lot of social norms as well. That is one thing against your parents, but probably seeing your friends go off to university and you going, I don't know if I want to do that. Have you always had that inner listen to your gut instinct? Is that quite strong in you?
I have, yeah. And what you mentioned about seeing my friends go off to university, it's definitely been difficult for me, because that was something I wanted just as much as I want this. It wasn't like a sideline thing, and it was something that was also really important to me, but I just knew it wasn't right. And yeah, as far as listening to my gut, it was almost a thing where I felt sick because I knew that I wasn't in the right place. And I was talking to a friend recently who was asking me, she was making a life decision. She didn't know whether to change her job and something wasn't right. And I had told her, you may not know the next place to go, but you do know right now you're not in the right place. You do know the next right step. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but you may not know exactly what your future is going to look like, but you're not supposed to be here. And that's how I felt.
I think that's really wise words. If I think back in my early 20s, it does feel like you've got lots of big decisions to be making about where's the next move for your career or just life, or where you should be living or what you should be doing. And I think having those wise words being told, I wish I had them in my early 20s as well, from a friend, because it's a really difficult time. You're making some really big decisions, and actually your peers are so important to you. So
yes,
also leaning inwardly to yourself as well, going, yeah, this isn't right. I just commend you. I think it's just a really difficult but brave and courageous, and look at everything that you're achieving now from actually listening to that as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I went to high school in the US, Aubree, and we were just having fun, right? Nothing was taken seriously. No one was doing anything with their lives at that point. We were probably just a bunch of kids trying to stay out of trouble more than anything, right? Mm-hmm. For your friendships going through those teenage years, as you're building up now, you're doing more and more of your business alongside schoolwork and such. Did you find it harder to make the friendships because you were doing something so different? Or was it the school that you were in was already catering to people with special interests? This wasn't much of a challenge for you?
Yeah, so it's funny that you mentioned that, because that was something that I was thinking about literally yesterday as far as my journey with friendships. It has been difficult just because my school was really small. My graduating class, I think, was 25.
Wow.
And so, so that made it difficult. Even though we all had certain interests, it was hard to find a clique or a group of friends. And then graduating and going to the pandemic, I was really excited about college because I'd get to meet new people, but then I didn't get that either. But now where I'm at, I've been able to make so many friends online who are in the same industry. And that has been so amazing. Some of my best friends that I talk to now almost every day have been from the internet, who are bakers who live in different states, unfortunately. But I think that's one thing that's really cool about the internet and about being in like a special industry like this. There's a camaraderie that's built there.
That's so true. Because I watch Rachel bake and I can see just how lonely it is in a kitchen on your own. And yeah, you've got help, people helping you do things sometimes. You may have someone come and help you clean up or do something. But, ultimately it's just you.
Yeah.
Until you get to a point that you are big enough to hire someone else to help you, or you migrate to a proper kitchen or something. But it's quite lonely. And so having those connections online with other bakers just to help you out, it's beautiful. I was going to ask you about that, where you've gotten help along the way as you've built this. Has it mostly come from your parents, or have you been able to rely on other bakers, or has it just been like YouTube to really get you through certain struggles? And like, how do I figure this out? What have you used?
Yeah, so a lot of YouTube, like you mentioned.
I think everyone does that, yeah.
Yeah, YouTube University, for sure. I've never taken a baking class in my life. And from my family and from my parents, of course, as far as the baking aspect of it and like the actual cake decorating and running the business, that has been me 100%. My parents have supported me as far as helping with deliveries and like investing in my business and things like that. They're such a huge help there, my parents and my siblings. But as far as the actual business portion of it, that is 100% me. So it's definitely been lonely at times, but also I'm grateful for it. As hard as it may be, I wouldn't change it for anything. I love what I do.
Do you find yourself sitting around the dinner table or just having some conversations during the hallway in your house saying, Dad, what do you think about this? Mom, what do you think about this? Or sis, bro, just to bounce ideas off, because you'll be, as you're growing your business or just thinking about different things that come to you as part of this business, you need a sounding board. So those conversations happening just on the fly.
Yeah, maybe it's friends, I don't know. Like you got to bounce ideas somewhere.
Yeah.
Who helps you with all that?
Yeah, so a lot of it is my mom. She's very creative. And so I ask a lot of her opinion, and sometimes I'll send things to friends or like my baker friends. But for the most part, it is just me. I feel like unless there's just something I don't know how to fix or I need like an opinion about like balance of the cake or something like that, I usually have a very specific vision in mind. And it's usually the people around me telling me like, no, it's fine. It looks fine. But I know that something's off with the cake, and it eats away at me until I fix it. But the second I fix it, then I'm happy.
Could you apply that to when, as you've developed your potential style of how you create your cakes and your bakes in general, have you kind of struggled with developing that, or have you found that to come quite naturally and you've aligned to something pretty quick?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I was mostly following what I saw on YouTube and Instagram, mostly trends, a lot of like fondant cakes. And I never really loved doing that. And then kind of when TikTok came around and I discovered cakes that could look like what I do now with like florals and kind of like abstract designs and stuff, I just fell in love with it. And so still kind of in the beginning of that journey, I was still following trends in what I saw, but I've really developed, I feel like, my own personal style of cake design. And even though all of my cakes are unique to each customer, I feel like you can still look at it and say, like, that's an Aubree's Cakery cake. That's what people have told me, at least. And I definitely pride myself in that, like in my work as well.
So that you have a very elegant style. It's very like quite stylish, and you like to use a lot of fresh florals, and you also like a lot of also neutrals as well. So white bases with beautiful designs or flowers or so there is definitely, when I look at your cakes, I can go, oh yeah, that's Aubree's, how you do that.
That's really cool, isn't it? You can, it's stamped Aubree, but without having the stamp on it, you just sort of know.
And I think that's that inner confidence that you get as you get going as well. So as you keep going through making your cakes, you then find that cake style that you're drawn to and you want to create more about as well. So I definitely see that with your cakes anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're taking orders for cakes, a lot of bakers go through this transition in the beginning because they want the business. the customer is dictating the cake of how they want that to look.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to battle with that too much in terms of, they send you a picture and say, can you make this? And maybe you push back, or maybe you say yes at first and then you hate making it. But, how was that transition for you before you developed your certain style and people came to you for that?
I haven't had too much trouble with that, actually. I still get orders every once in a while for more like novelty cakes, you might call them, or maybe like a basketball theme or like a kid's theme that I don't really do. Nowadays, I will kind of push back, like you mentioned, and of course kindly say like, this is my style of cake, or maybe recommend someone else who can do it better, because I wouldn't want to take on like a cake that looks like a basketball and not even do it well. And I feel like that comes with, I can't think of the word, but like as a business owner, you have to know what you can do well, and it wouldn't really make sense for me. I wouldn't want to produce something that I'm not proud of, or just for the money, I guess. And what I also tell bakers is what you post is what you're going to get. So if, keep posting the kids' cakes, then you're only going to get kids' cakes orders. But, if you take time away from it and maybe do some of like your own style, your own designs, and start posting those, and that's what you're going to get. And there are other cakes that I've done that are more like kids' designs and stuff for family maybe, but I don't post them because I don't want to do them anymore. And so I feel like that's what's helped for the most part.
It's a really good point, because you're just going to attract what you put out there. People are just going to associate you with that approach. But then, speaking of posting, you've taken on TikTok and you've taken on Instagram, and you've grown really quickly on TikTok, especially. And from the very, very first post, even, you had a very good response. And I'm just wondering if that sort of set an uncomfortable bar for you from the very beginning, because now anything that doesn't beat that can eat at you. And if you've had to deal with that and overcome it, or do you still struggle with it? Like, because you've come in so strong, right? And you're trying to maintain it.
Yeah, that's a really great point. My first video I posted on TikTok got I think it's at 100,000 views.
And you're not even in it, right? You're not talking in it. You're not
She's
even
talking.
You're talking.
I'm talking,
okay,
but my face isn't in it. I was just making a cupcake. And so literally just a vanilla cupcake. And so I think it got 50 or 60,000 views in the first day. And so, yeah, that was really hard. As appreciative as I am for that, it does make it hard, especially, with algorithms and stuff like that. And you may say oh, I'm producing even better content now. How is this doing not as well as this may be? But I kind of had to take a step back and realize why I do this at the end of the day. It's not for the numbers. It's not for the money. It's because I love it. And I also had to realize social media has set such an unrealistic standard as to what success means. And, when you look at a video, it may have 20,000 views. And in Instagram world, that's nothing, literally nothing, which sounds insane. But when you think about it, you're 20,000 people. That is a crazy amount of people that have seen my work. Even 100 people, if 100 people were in a room and came up to you and said that they liked your work, you would be over the moon. And so that's why I say I had to take a step back and really evaluate what's important to me.
It's interesting getting your opinion on this, because you've grown up in an age of social media. We don't get to talk to a lot of people like that who that's all you've known is this thing around you has been around for as long as you've been baking almost. And so it's always there. You've understood it from a very early age, and it can put more pressure on you to perform and distract from your actual day-to-day of what you're really here to do. So I just think it's really interesting to get your take on that and how you've been able to manage it. Because even it never seems to go away, and you just have to constantly remind yourself. It doesn't matter if it didn't do well.
It's just a game, right?
It's just a game.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. It really is. And sometimes I wish I didn't grow up like this. I think it's a little bit unfortunate sometimes. And of course I'm grateful for it. But also I kind of miss when times were a little bit simpler. And I kind of got a glimpse of it when I was really little, but I didn't fully get to experience it. And, I remember friends having Instagram when we were in 6th grade, 11 and 12 years old.
Wow.
And one thing for me, my parents didn't allow me to have social media until I was about 14. And I'm grateful for that. I would do the same thing with my kids because it was just unnecessary. Like it just honestly was. And I'm grateful that I didn't have to experience that until I was maybe a little bit older, because just jumping straight into it can be really overwhelming, dangerous sometimes, and really kind of like a toxic place to be at such a young age.
Yeah, a lot of comparison as well, though, and missing out on things. And I think it's a really difficult thing to navigate. But also for you, as you've grown on TikTok and on Instagram, I mean, you've got massive numbers across both platforms. But we do hear when we talk to other cake makers who've done quite well on TikTok that there are a lot of negative comments that come. I don't know whether it's just a TikTok thing and not so much across Instagram. Mm-hmm. And you've had your own fair share of comments that have come back, and you've actually been pretty open about sharing them in your videos as well when someone said some comments that are pretty awful to you about you. First of all, how do you deal with that and process those comments? Because obviously you're on your own as a business, so you're having to read them, possibly delete them, or think about, do you internalize them, or what do you do with them? But then also, how do you stop it from affecting you internally as well, and your confidence as well, like for your next video or your next cake that you want to make?
Yeah. So that's definitely been a journey for me. And I'm really grateful. My community is really positive. 95% of the, comments I get are really positive and really loving. But then every once in a while, a few creep in. And it's crazy to me because I've never left a hate comment in my life. I can't imagine like going onto someone's page and being like, that looks ugly. You look ugly. I've never even considered doing that. And so, having that done to me was really hard, and it doesn't happen in person. No one's ever walked up to me and said, that cake is ugly that you made, but it happens online. And that was really hard for me to experience. And from the outside, a lot of people will say like, oh, just ignore it. Like, don't even look at it. It doesn't mean anything, but it's a lot harder than it seems. And I address them every once in a while because, I like to put it out there that obviously I'm a human being and I have feelings, and just a reminder to be kinder to everyone, because you never know what someone's going through internally or personally. And so I think addressing that has been helpful. And then the feedback I've gotten from that has also been really helpful, because it's been so many people, encouraging me and telling me the exact opposite of whatever these, negative. And so that's definitely been hard. And it's been weird, honestly, if I'm being completely honest. It's just a different experience. Someone telling you that like they hate your work that you just spent hours on. And so it's been hard, but it's gotten better. It's gotten easier over time.
Yeah, the flip side of that could be like, if you got recognized at the gas station or something, right? I mean, has this happened? Or you're in Walmart or someone says,
yeah,
hey, are you Aubree? I watch your TikTok. That must make you feel just another level of weird, right?
It happens a lot, actually. It's happened multiple times, just random places. And sometimes we're like, I look crazy, or I'm having a bad day, or like whatever it is. And so that's kind of hard too. And I can't even imagine having like millions and millions of followers. It must happen every single day. But I remember the first time that happened, and it was a really weird feeling. But everyone I've met has been super kind, super sweet. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, well, you got a lot of fans, that's for sure, rooting for you. Make sure that you're going to be successful.
And are most of your fans in the cake community, or does it just go far and wide? Are you inspiring lots of different people?
Other kids, even,
Yeah, it's all kinds of people, a lot of bakers, but a lot of people who aren't bakers, and just people who, like me and enjoy seeing me work in my business. So yeah, it's definitely not just bakers. I would say it's more people who aren't bakers, actually.
I want to talk about cupcake boxes, especially if you need room for tall ones or floral cupcakes. There's never really been a cupcake box on the market that gave you the confidence to safely transport them without damaging them. Nor has there been anything that makes it easy to place or remove cupcakes without ruining those pretty decorations. Until now. The OLBAA cupcake box fixes all these issues. Plenty of height, strong, and a gorgeous cupcake box that opens fully into a built-in serving tray. No mess, no fuss, no cupcake teeth, and no damage. Even your customers will appreciate just how easy it is to open the box and serve right from the tray. check them out at www.olbaa.shop.
Are you inspiring, taking this brave risk of not going to university and starting your own business and building these social media platforms and building a very successful business as well? Are you inspiring lots of other young CEOs or entrepreneurs? And do you have like your own little community or people then reaching out to you? Or, I'm really intrigued.
Yeah, I get some of the sweetest messages, and it's hard to get back to them sometimes, but because I get so many. But I get really sweet messages a lot of times from like younger girls saying that like, they're inspired by me, or it warms my heart when I hear that people say like, oh, you helped me gain more confidence in my business, or gain more confidence in my pricing, or help me, pick up baking again and like my love for it. And so, yeah, my community is so supportive and so sweet. I'm so grateful for it.
It's probably just having the amount of time to go back through it all, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard at times to keep up with all of it. But yeah, I'm really appreciative.
You've got hectic days, you've got orders, you're doing social media. Things can go wrong, right? You could get sick, something can happen, So, I mean, we have to talk about like those kinds of stressful days. And one particular cake that is worth mentioning here is the first cake that you did for Diddy, because I think we need to walk the listeners through like just the level of, the task that was given to you, as cool as it sounds to do a cake for someone like that, just what they threw at you. Just walk us through that day, because I just think it's a very great story.
Yeah, so I've been able to make 2 cakes for him. The first one I made, I had about 3 days notice, which is already short notice, but I was able to get that one done. And then they came back to me some months later for another cake. And that cake, I had about like 12 hours notice. And then I had to...
Because that's like call you in the morning, it needs to be ready that evening or something?
Yeah, like basically they called me the evening before at around 7:00. And then they said it needed to be at the airport an hour away from where I live at 10 the next morning.
Wow.
And I hadn't baked a single thing. I didn't even know about this. So I had to start from the beginning. And usually, I prep things in advance. So I bake maybe like 2 or 3 days in advance, and I put the cakes in the freezer, and I have plenty of time to work on it. I've never had to cram a cake out in that amount of time.
And this isn't a 1-tier cake, right?
No, it's 3 tiers.
3 tiers. Yeah.
Yes. It was 3 tiers. I finished on the dot that I had to leave. I put the finishing touches on, and then we like ran out the door. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, I got to say.
You
it
were
was
through
really
the night,
hard.
all through the night.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't get any sleep. And then delivering it like an hour and a half away was really difficult. I was exhausted. But yeah, that's definitely one of my proudest moments. And like, even regardless of who it was for, but just the fact that I was able to get that done in that short amount of time, I'm really, really proud of.
But it didn't stop there, right? The delivery was a bit challenging.
A little bit, yeah. It was. So yeah, the delivery, I try to put that out of my mind because it was a little bit traumatizing.
I'm sorry to bring it back up.
Yeah, the delivery was a little bit rough because the cakes didn't have time to like set fully. It's hard working with fresh cakes, and they weren't frozen. So in the car, it was really bumpy, whatever route we had to go on that day, and the cake tipped over in the box. I cried on the way there. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe I just did this. And then this happened. But I was able to fix it. When I got there, I was so nervous. I was so worried because, it's a big deal and it can open a lot of doors for me, a lot of opportunities. And I didn't want to, disappoint anyone or myself mostly. And so, yeah, but then a few days later, they called me back and said that he loved it so much. I didn't get to meet him that day, but she said that he loved it and that they'd definitely come back to me again.
Cake deliveries are just so stressful anyway at the most of times, right? And I must say, I don't worry about it so much anymore because we have our lovely boxes. But before we even started going down that route of creating our boxes, I had a lot of anxiety around cake deliveries and just anything more than we live on a road that has a big incline. And so just even getting off our driveway, it was just the cake would just slide straight away.
Yeah.
Or the cup. And it was just so stressful. I'd just be looking at this cake. And those are the times where the cake boxes weren't tall enough. So like the cake is actually exposed and so you're looking at this cake, but I can imagine delivering a 3-tier cake that's just set. So probably hasn't had enough time to chill in the car. and you just have to go over one bump, and then all of a sudden that's who was with you in the car, because there must have been a lot of
your mom. Oh gosh.
All right, there must. I'm just thinking about. Am I your mom? And just
mom's driving.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was freaking out as much as I was.
Any siblings as well, or was just your mom with you?
It was just my mom with me. She usually helps me with deliveries.
And of course, you don't have really cold weather, generally speaking.
Not at all.
So this could be a hot day anyway.
Yeah.
Which only compounds the issue.
The stress. And how far along were you at that point when it just started to...
Maybe like 10 minutes
wow.
into the drive. Yeah, it was horrible. And that had never happened to me before either. So I was like, of course, when it's something, important like this, it has to happen. So that was beyond stressful.
Did you bring your tools with you, an extra buttercream?
I did, yeah. I brought a few things with me,
amazing.
And it wasn't like in perfect condition, which of course killed me because I'm beyond a perfectionist, but it was good. And for the time given and, the challenges and everything like that, I'm so proud of that project total.
Absolutely. Credit to you, because I've seen Rachel get thrown into that situation, obviously not for anyone famous, but still, it's like every cake is your personal masterpiece, right? And it's like a friend who checked you out. I remember what was that?
Well, I think it's every baker's worst nightmare. I think we've all got a story where we didn't put a cake in our books that we are supposed to have in the books. And then it's only, and you get a message saying, so what time should I pick up on Thursday? And you're like, it's Tuesday. And you're like I don't have a cake
not this
for
week
Thursday. And then all of a sudden you're just like, you feel that panic come through your body. And you're like, just check, just breathe. Maybe they've got it wrong. And they're always like a 2-tier cake or something extravagant that wants lots of things on it and intricate. And I mean, I just had one over Christmas where like just drained out of me as well, though, when you just have that, you've got to turn this around and you're like, when am I going to do it? But you don't want to let someone down, right? It's a big day or it's a big moment. Someone's... And
what's unfortunate is, you're probably not going to be too surprised if they give you another 12-hour kind of notice because you've delivered, right? So it's like, we can call Aubree. She can get us a cake tomorrow, and it's 6 p.m. or something like that.
I hope not. I hope I never have to do that again. That was horrible. But yeah, I've had plenty of those, or not plenty. I've had a couple of those where, they've called me 2 days or the day before. When should I pick up? And I'm like, oh my God, forgot. I'm like, not even prepared at all. That's definitely happened.
Nowadays, I just keep some emergency buttercream in the freezer. It's just so like easier. I mean, you can't always dictate the cake sizes, but buttercream, you can have a little bit.
Yeah, an emergency bag.
The other thing about that, because they called me at 7 at night, no stores were open. And so I thankfully had some things, I ran into Walmart, which is open up until 10 p.m. But they don't have any cake supplies. And so I was able to get some ingredients and then, figure out some things from what I had. So that made it extra difficult. And so, they called me at 7 and then I had to go to the store and do all these things. So then I didn't get to start until maybe like 10 o'clock that night.
How much of your house have you taken over, or your parents' kitchen with your stuff? I mean, have they had enough? Do you feel like you're hitting that limit where it's like, okay, Aubree, let's talk about this?
Yeah, I've definitely outgrown the space. The entire kitchen, all the empty cabinets are all filled with my stuff. And then my mom is also, she's an event designer. So she does like weddings and parties and stuff like that. So her stuff as well, like this house is just filled to the brim with like party supplies and cake supplies and different things like that. So yeah, I've definitely gotten to the point where I've outgrown it and hopefully I can move into a space of my own in the next couple of years. That's the next goal for me.
Does that work well with your mum being an event designer? Does that do you both bounce off each other? Like she might say, Aubree, I've got a great client, or I can suggest someone for you to make a cake for. Has that helped your business as you've been growing it?
Yeah, it has. It's been really cool. There's been a couple of events that we've gotten to work on together. Actually, one time someone hired me for a wedding and I was telling my mom about it. I told her the client's name and she was like, wait, that sounds familiar. And she works with another woman who's an event designer and she kind of like assists her. And we found out that we were working on the same wedding and we didn't even know at first.
Wow.
So that was really cool. So things like that happen sometimes. Yeah.
That's really cool. It's nice, actually. You collaborate with your mum.
Yeah.
You know, best supporter in this, and then you get to do a joint effort for something like that. But I've got to ask you, though, because, you know, it's not just cakes that you've done. Obviously, your growth on TikTok has brought you into brand collaborations as well, which you may or may not have thought may come about at this point in your career. I don't know. How have you found that experience to be? I mean, is that something where, you know, a lot of people listening to this are just going to have no idea how that works? Is that something where they give you ideas on how they want you to create the content? Do they leave it up to you? Does it change from one brand to another? How do you process all that brand association stuff?
Yeah, that's been really cool. It's been really hard. It's kind of funny you mentioned that because when I was little, seeing like people who are famous on YouTube and Instagram, those are the people who I would look up to more than celebrities almost. And so they would do brand deals and get sent PR and stuff. So when that stuff started happening to me, it was really cool. But it is a lot of work. It's a lot of pressure sometimes. Some of the brand deals I've gotten have been from brands that have reached out to me, but then some of them have been from brands that I've reached out to as well, or even something as simple as like tagging the brand like I did with you guys, and now I'm on your podcast.
Yeah.
So different things, different opportunities like that have come up. It's been a little bit tricky to navigate, especially the payment portion of it, because a lot of times a brand will ask you, you know, what is your rate or what's your expectation? And I never want to lowball myself or not say my quote high enough. I don't want to get underpaid, basically.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but then you say it too high and then they're like, well, that's out of the budget. And so it's been hard to find like that sweet spot as far as, you know, getting the payment that you deserve, basically, for your following and for your work.
And it probably varies by brand as well and what budget they have and what they're willing to spend, because it might not necessarily correlate with a bigger brand having a bigger budget. It might actually not be the case, right? It might be the smaller brand really wants to work with you, so is willing to spend that extra mile and spend that money with you. But I don't think there's any rule book on it. There's no kind of guidebook on what you should charge and I think it's one of those things that are probably talking about it a lot on your TikTok community, is that where you get more insights into or reaching out to your baking community or your other friends that are not necessarily in the baking community but have significant followers as well. Like, what do you charge? So what's your rates and what should I be going after here?
Yeah. Exactly. And that's exactly what I do. I've reached out to my friends who have maybe a similar following to me or, you know, a similar brand, reached out to them, asked them what they charged, what they got paid. And thankfully, it's more than just like business camaraderie now, but they're my actual friends. And so we're able to talk about these things. And for me, I tend to undervalue myself a lot. And so I didn't want to do that when it came to this type of stuff, because brands, especially big brands, like, they have the money. And so, you know, if they find you valuable, they're going to pay you. And so I didn't want to undercut myself and my value.
Yeah. And you're not going to shortcut them. Like, you're going to give it 110% and generate something, you know, because it's not something that you do every day. And I just think it's such a cool, unique experience. And knowing you and you're a perfectionist and your determination, you want to make it ace, right? Like the best thing that you've put out. So it's worth charging all what you think is worth in that regard. You're right. It's just such a hard balance.
It is, yeah.
To figure that out. And there's probably brands out there that you really want to work with where it may not matter so much how much they charge you. You just love working with them and you just think what they do is really cool. That may also have another effect on...
Was that the case with Pretty Little Thing?
Oh, yeah. I was really excited about that. That was really cool. That was a event that I was able to go to. And that was my first brand event that I was invited to. So I was really nervous. But it was a really cool experience. Everyone I met there was so sweet. And it was a brand that I already know and love and use. And so that was really cool for me. And then I think kind of going back to that, I think brands kind of take advantage of that sometimes, knowing that oh, you may already, love our brand, or we have a big name or big followers. And so then they use that to say like, oh, well, we'll kind of do this in exchange for like promotion. But I'm like, well, promotion doesn't pay the bills at the end of the day. Like, I got to get paid. It's not as much as I love you and your brand, like I deserve to get paid at the end of the day. So, yeah.
We talk about this a lot, the economics of running a cake business. One of the hardest things is getting your pricing right, pricing so that you have profit, pricing to get over any imposter syndrome that you have about yourself, to make sure that you are getting paid for the effort, your skill, everything you've put in. I mean, was that much of a challenge for you when you, not when you were starting out because you're so young, obviously, but in the last few years, even just sort of nailing that price structure to make sure that it was appropriate?
Yeah, it's probably been the hardest part as far as my business. It's been really difficult, but I'm finally at a point where I'm confident in my pricing. And I had to come to terms with the fact that like this number didn't just fall out of the sky. I'm not just, I want to get paid this amount. It's from breaking down, first of all, the ingredients that I use, which are expensive. And everything I do is from scratch. So that's expensive, as well as flours and things like that. And then on top of that, getting paid for my time. And these cakes take hours and hours. Like wedding cakes, I've worked on a wedding cake for like 20 hours before total. And that's not even including like the time it takes to research and to design and different things like that. And so, yeah, I've finally come to a point where I'm like, listen, this is my pricing and I don't go back on that anymore. Before I would maybe give discounts or different things like that. But I would rather get paid what I'm worth for one cake than have to make 5 cakes and get skimped on them as far as the pricing, if that makes sense. So
yeah, it does. I mean, look, customers have a lot of choice, right? They could go to the supermarket and get a cake. They could go to someone down the street who wants to undercut, but probably not make any money. I mean, in 3 years, they'll probably not even exist anymore as a business, right? Because it's just not sustainable. So maintaining your price, Rachel's talked about this before. It's like, you are raising the price point and the bar for all bakers so that everyone benefits who's a baker, right?
Yeah.
So nobody is left behind struggling if all of you come together and say, look, we have to charge our worth, our skill, and the cost of ingredients and the time. And the more we can get the word out about that and educate other starting bakers to just do that from the beginning, the better off this industry will be, right? And you get what you deserve and it makes it worth doing it. I think it's such an important point.
Exactly.
I'm not surprised it's one of the hardest things.
It's really hard. And how I see it is when I go to Target, I expect Target prices and Target quality. But if I'm going to, whatever this designer store is, I'm expecting designer quality. And so I would hope that people who, are paying this price, which is not cheap, expect my quality that I produce. And sometimes I have to look back at my own work and I'm like, no, this is absolutely worth it, this price, probably more. And so, yeah, when I look at it that way, it definitely helps my confidence as far as like standing firm in my pricing.
Yeah, and you want to be in it for the long term, right? Because if you're charging anything less, you're just going to burn out and you're just going to walk away from the business, being a little bit like, oh, I could have made, why did I waste that amount of time doing this to make very little from it? So it's like there's that fine balance between, as you're starting off, putting in some profit. And as you get more and more established, you can then start to raise your prices because you have a brand, right, around you. Like people buy into brands and they know, oh, I'm going to get an Aubree cake. Well, that has some status to it. So it's a journey. It's a journey from the beginning into finding your style and then getting to that point where you can keep charging. And then every year or every so often, you're going to be reassessing your prices based on your skill set, based on the demand that's coming in for you. Because if you're turning away cake orders, then there's clearly like, well, either I've got to put my prices up or I need to hire someone else to help scale this, right? It's a great problem to have to get to that stage. But I'm glad that you've got to that point where you feel comfortable with your pricing. But have you hit burnout? Because I think you're doing quite a lot with your social media. You're even on YouTube as well. So you've got your page there, you're on TikTok, you're on Instagram, and you also do different, you're not posting the same videos to Instagram as you are to TikTok. and you're doing cake orders, and this is a 9-to-5 job, this is a 7-day-a-week job, have you hit that burnout, or have you put good boundaries in?
Yeah, absolutely. Multiple times now. One thing for me is I've had to realize I have to give myself breaks, and I cannot run, I can't run it on empty. I can't run a business on empty. And then that also comes out like in my cake design. I would notice that like when I would be extremely tired or extremely overwhelmed, like it would come out in my work, and I wasn't happy with my work, and I don't want to, ever give anyone less than my best. And so, I have to put a cap on how many I'll take in like a weekend, or I don't usually do orders for holidays actually, which is funny because a lot of bakers do, like that would be the time where you would get the most orders. But I want to enjoy Christmas with my family. I want to enjoy, summer and different things like that, or like take a vacation every once in a while. And I feel like pacing that out is good for me because like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. And so I don't want to get to the point where in 5 years, I don't want to do it at all. I want to, be able to sustain it. So
is that what burnout looks like for you? You recognize it in the product. You find that it's not as good as what it should be. And that's when it sort of triggers in your mind.
Yeah, it's not as good as it should be. And then also like my excitement for it kind of dies out. When I'm really excited about my work, I'm always researching, always coming up with ideas and, trying new designs and different things like that. But when I notice myself slipping away from that and not even being excited about what I do anymore, then that's how I know I need to kind of take a step back.
Yeah. I think it's great that you recognize it, because I think for a lot of people that they may recognize it and they may not until it gets explained or someone points it out to them and says, hey, you need to take a break.
Yeah,
right?
maybe someone in your household or one of your friends is saying like, Aubree, you're not yourself. I recognize it in myself. I just get really like, you go through the motions of just like, I've just got to do this. I've got to go, you do then need to, or sometimes you need to go lie down, or you just feel a bit negative, or you just feel a bit like you haven't factored in a rest. And I think that's really hard when you have a business or your own business where there isn't that switch off. Like you can be busy all day and then you go to check your social media and it'll be flooded and there'll be more things. And that's like another set of things on your to-do list then to go through. And it's like, where can you go just to escape, right? Just I need to not look at anything. I don't want to look at a cake. I don't want to look at my phone, because then all of my social media is covered with like my channels of like people, as lovely as it is. But when you start to resent that and resent going online to see these things, then you know that, hold on, when was the last time I took a break? When was the last time I did something just fun for me? Or it might be that your friends are calling you up saying, hey, Aubree, we haven't seen you.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that part. And then also physically, it's really hard. And I feel silly talking about this sometimes because it's like, I'm just making cakes, but it is hard standing on my feet all day. And, you're doing the same kind of like motions with your arms. And I already have like shoulder and back problems. And so, making cakes and stuff and like really heavy wedding cakes and stuff on top of that has taken a huge toll on my body. And so, regardless of like the burnout, like mentally, but I'm like, I got to take a break because I physically can't handle this. Like my body is breaking down from this.
It's very important. It is. I'm glad you recognize it and, you do things you got to take care of yourself. Right?
Yeah, it is so physical because you are literally, and especially when you've got a busy load of orders, because there's no shortcuts, right? No one's going to bake the cakes. So you've got to get all those cakes out. You've got to get all the buttercream out. You've got to get anything else that you're going to be adding on, macro, whatever else your designs. You've got to like run, get supplies. You got to run, get flour, any of these other things and boxes and, all the other. And there isn't that sitting down. And it's very like intense concentration as well. I know when I've done so much, I feel like my eyes sting and I just need to just take those intensive days I used to do prepping for farmers markets, and I'd just be doing like hundreds of macarons and cakes and trying to get everything done. You just feel like I just need 5 minutes. I feel like I'm a bit of a brain fog or
exactly.
I haven't eaten. You haven't taken a break. You haven't even had a coffee.
That too. Definitely. I have to stop and remind myself to eat or ask someone to pick up something for me or something like that, because the concentration is just crazy. And a lot of people, you know, anyone who's seen me work outside of my family, if like a friend has been over or something, they're like, are you okay? Like, are you mad? And I'm like, no, I'm not mad. I'm just concentrating. Or I get that on my videos sometimes. People will tell me like, oh, you need to smile more. I'm like, I'm working.
It's the last thing I need to do right now.
I know, that is just so not what I'm worried about. I am working and I'm focused.
Yeah, you're in the zone, right? And it's and especially I think it's lovely when you have those days where you just have like the one cake to make and you've got that freedom, and they're probably the better cakes actually, that they come out with the better designs, or rather than those days where you're frantic and you just literally go through the motions and you haven't got time to think things through. You just got to go, I've just got to get it done.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us, Aubree, you know, you've done so much already, really, at the point that you're at in your career. But, you know, looking out a few years, what's on your mind in terms of what you want to do, or other areas where you feel like you might want to take the business, aside from getting on the Food Network with your own TV show, of course? What other things do you think are in store for you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. My list is like never ending as far as things that I want to do, which is a good and bad thing. I'm working on classes right now. I'm, you know, developing classes, some that are in person that I want to teach kind of like hands-on, as well as some that I want to put online. Of course, I want to have like my storefront eventually, and I would absolutely love to have my own line of kitchenware. That's been like my dream since I was a little kid, like something that could be in Target or like West Elm, like kind of more upscale. I have such a specific vision for what these tools and bakeware would look like. So I'm really excited about that.
That's amazing, isn't it? That's so cool.
I just know she's going to nail it.
Yeah, she is, isn't she?
Thank you.
It's just brilliant. Listen, it's just been so good to talk to you. We just like wrapping up with a little quick fire question and answer session. Mm-hmm. First thing that comes to mind, you can explain it. You don't have to explain it. But I'm going to go first. And what I'd like to know is your preference, whether it's American buttercream, Swiss meringue buttercream, Italian meringue buttercream, ganache, fondant.
Well, anything but fondant. But no, I actually use two types. So I use Swiss meringue buttercream as a filling just because it tastes much better. It's really yummy. And then I actually use American buttercream on the outside of my cake. I find it holds up much better, especially like in warm weather, and it's much easier to handle for me. So both.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that warm weather feeling, right? And we talked to other bakers who work in like tropical climates, and where it's like literally 30 degrees all year round. But I mean, if Swiss meringue has just got a high ratio of butter, so that just, if it's left out, it just is going to, and I've seen it happen actually with my own cakes previously. So, yeah. Not a great one. Ganache is really good for that as well. It's quite stable. One aspect of baking you won't compromise on?
For me, that is definitely baking from scratch. I love baking from scratch. I can't imagine ever using box cakes for my work. And that's no like, you know, shade or anyone who does, because every business is different. You can do whatever you want to do. But for me, a homemade cake is just better. It just tastes better. And it's a lot easier to work with also because it's a little bit denser. It's a lot more stable for wedding cakes.
Yeah.
I've just got to ask before we go to the next question. Does your family eat all the cake scraps? Are they always like, oh, it's Aubree baking today?
Yes, they're like always like a bunch of little like birds like trying to find the last scraps of cake. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like you would think they've never had cake before in their life.
That's amazing.
But I've been doing this for half of my life. So
they love it, right?
They love it. I love it too, actually, when there's cake scraps. Do you have a baking book to share from your bookshelf?
I do. I have it right next to me. The Flavor Bible. I love this book.
Who's that by? Does it say, or is it just called The Flavor Bible?
I don't know, actually. By Karen Page and Andrew something that I can't pronounce.
Excellent. No, that's all right. Flavor Bible. We're going to make a note of that.
Yes, I love this book. It has so many amazing flavor combinations. And that's one thing I've been wanting to experiment with more, is having like cool flavor combos and stuff. So love this book.
That's amazing. Very cool.
And who's going to make your next birthday cake? If you could choose any baker in the world, who would it be?
For me, that would be Lima Cakes on Instagram. I love her work. Oh my gosh. I want her to make my wedding cake. Like her stuff is so gorgeous. And that's like, you know, where I see myself hopefully in the future. I'd love to make cakes like that.
Yeah, her work is just out of this world, right? And I think that's like years of skill and decorate. Yeah, just incredible.
Beautiful. Really cool. Oh, well, listen, Aubree, thanks so much. That was just an amazing hour it's just gone by talking about your career and your life. So we really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it. And thank you so much. And keep inspiring because it's just amazing.
Do you know what? 21, what are you going to be doing in 10 years?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
Amazing. I just loved it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Aubree. And that's episode 24 of My Baking Journey with Aubree. Thanks, Aubree, for being a part of it. If you want to learn more about Aubree or maybe even order a cake from her, check her out in the show notes. We're back next week with another amazing baker, so don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button in your favorite podcast app so that you get notified as soon as the podcast comes out. And finally, who is this podcast brought to you by? OLBAA, of course. Packaging for bakers designed by a baker. Check us out at www.olbaa.shop. See you next time.